Welcome to Feed Your Lion. I'm Dr. L.I.O.N, and I'm here to aid you in the mastery of total health, spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, and financial. So prepare to have your wellness tank filled up with this podcast. Welcome back to another episode of Feed Your Lion. Today's guest is Joe Luciano. He is an administrator with L.I.O.N Dispensaries. And since we had talked to you guys before about the medical marijuana card, I wanted to finish that up with talking about the dispensary side. So Joe's going to give us some good education today. So Joe, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Jodelle. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Absolutely. So let's start with, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into the dispensary side of the medical marijuana and, go from there a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So my background is actually in education, music education to be specific. I have a bachelor's degree from Westchester University of Pennsylvania. I graduated in 2015. I taught music for a little bit and just wasn't for me. Working in a classroom came with a lot of very specific challenges. I have a lot of respect for teachers, especially teachers who have a tenure. They're doing a really good thing. It's a whole life commitment. But anyway, so moving forward, I was working in mental health for a few years after college, inpatient psych with adolescents. And that was pretty wild, to say the least. Talk about coming into a stressful work environment. Every day is different. My goal was to move into music therapy, get the experience in the field, and then go back to school. But I ended up leaving that job from just a couple years of stress. And I wanted to find something else. And I was laying in my bed in August of 2019, and I was on Indeed, and I just saw that there was a dispensary opening. Mm-hmm. And it happened to be right around the corner from my house. How more perfect could that be, right? Work in my hometown, selling cannabis. It was like a dream. And I was laying in bed. I thought I was dreaming. So I applied, and on a whim, just applied, filled out their little assessment beforehand, and then got a call back, and they ended up hiring the wrong Joe, if you could believe that, and had to really advocate for myself and call a few times to really be like, hey, no, you never offered me that job you said you did. You can't make this up. The cannabis industry, right? You can't make this
hilarious.
Up. And so I started, I finally got in. I was supposed to, I applied and, interviewed for a full-time position as a bud tender, but they hired me part-time. They actually made a position for me because they felt so terrible that they hired the wrong person. So he ended up working a week and then quitting. That's how the story goes there. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into cannabis. I started working. I got trained a week of intense cannabis science. And oh man, I would be a broke man if I had the amount of light bulbs, if I owned the amount of light bulbs that went off in my head that week. Because, for me, I was pretty young. I was 16 when I was first exposed to cannabis in 2008. And I didn't know anything about it, even all the way through my more normal cannabis use. When I turned 19, I was in college. And through my adulthood now, it wasn't until I started working in the cannabis industry and went through that initial training that everything started to make sense. Like, why do I get high? Like, what's going on in my brain? Sure. From a chemical standpoint. And so I was hooked. And so for me, my journey through the cannabis industry has been a little unique, I would say. Non-traditional, just because like most people, you start in the dispensary, you start as a dispensary worker, whether you're working the front desk, whether you're actively selling cannabis or making recommendations to patients, or just working in an adult use setting and just selling weed to people, right? I started there, and you climb the ladder. But for me, education in cannabis doesn't really exist. It doesn't really have
Mhm.
a foundation yet. Certainly not a standardized one. So I was just very fortunate to be trained by some of the most brilliant people I've ever met in cannabis and just in life in general, who are still good friends today, to me. So yeah, that's how I got from where I was to where I am.
So you use the term bud tender. What does that mean for somebody who might not know what that is?
It's a great question. So they are tending to the bud. No, they are the person that would be standing across the counter from you, um, either making a recommendation, talking to you about, hopefully, if you're a patient in a medical market, talking to you about your specific qualifying condition, your symptoms, and then getting into product recommendations based on terpene content, and just the chemical makeup of each strain. If you're an adult use in an adult use market, then it's the person that is at the cash register,
Okay.
maybe doing the same thing.
Okay.
Hopefully, you
Okay.
know, education's power.
So what does that education, like if you have a new client coming to you, they just got, their medical card for whatever reason, chronic pain, whatever the issue may be, and they have no experience with marijuana. What does that look like for them when they first come into a dispensary? Like what's that experience? Like how much time, do you guys spend with them typically or at the actual dispensary?
Yeah, we love any newbies. We love them. Terra Leaf specifically, excuse me, one of our tenants as a company is patient education. So we offer consults to patients. We put all of our employees, I actually developed a training guide and a whole training program. It's like my child, it's a living, breathing thing. Um, to give all of our employees a foundation of education that doesn't really exist with your big multi-state operators, your True Leaves or
Mhm.
your Cannabis, not to knock them at all, they're wonderful companies, but what we do with our education is special. So that new person that's coming in, they can expect with Terra Leaf specifically, they can expect to have a product specialist, is what we would call our bud tenders, our product specialists, who will sit down with them. If they want, they can stand, they can walk, they can, pace, whatever is most comfortable for them, but to ask specific open-ended questions that can help somebody become more comfortable sharing a little bit about what's going on with them, because it's very personal to ourselves and our own health. And with the goal of making the best recommendation possible. So when for anybody who's getting their cannabis card or looking to get their cannabis card, their first visit, you're going to want to bring a state ID with you. You're going to want to bring your cannabis patient card with you. In West Virginia, it's digital. They send it to you they don't even send it to you in your email. You have to log into a portal online, and then you can view it and download it. But every dispensary seems in West Virginia to be printing them out and laminating them for patients, which is awesome. But you're going to want to bring those two documents with you and bring questions.
Mhm.
Bring questions. The more questions that you can ask, the better you can help yourself in cannabis. The more that we know about the plant, the better therapeutic application we can choose.
Sure. So talk a little bit about Terra Leaf in general, like how old is the company? How did you get started, that as a company, and where are they at? Are they just in West Virginia? Are they beyond that?
So Terra Leaf is its own. There are no other Terra Leafs. We only have our number one store here in Huntington.
Mhm.
The company that owns Terra Leaf, we owned and operated 3 dispensaries in Pennsylvania for almost 4 years, called Terra Vita. But Terra Leaf is it's the culmination of everything we learned in our previous market, put into practice here. So we are equipped over there to handle a patient load, 400 or 500 patients a day. We come from a coming from that very busy market that we were in Pennsylvania, coming down to West Virginia is definitely a change. It's a little slower pace down here, but we've been open since March. We actually acquired our license a few years back. And when we did, there was no product available in West Virginia. It's been a slow roll with product availability in West Virginia. So we didn't see any product on any shelf until the end of last year. I believe in November, but don't quote me on that. And so when we finally got product in March, we celebrated. I think we all danced a nice fun dance that day.
Yeah, yeah. So you talk about the licensing. What does it take? I mean, first of all, who's regulating dispensaries? It's the pharmacy board, correct? Like it's
In West Virginia, it's the Department of Health and Human Resources.
okay.
I understand in Ohio, it's the Board of Pharmacy. In Pennsylvania, it's the Department of Health.
Okay.
Every state's a little bit different in their oversight board. They'll all have a medical marijuana or medical cannabis board with different members of the community that are on there to help the state guide the legislation. What we've seen in West Virginia with the DHHR is are rather lax laws. They don't necessarily, for instance, a big difference in certain markets is how regulated your dispensary is, your operations, your build outs. Some in Ohio, you can't have the actual vault where you keep all of your product cannot be seen. There cannot have a line of sight from the patient perspective. In West Virginia, that doesn't really matter as much. In Pennsylvania, we had to, by law, keep our vault at 50% humidity and between, I think it was like 25 and 30 degrees Celsius. And when we would have DOH inspections, they would look at the thermometer, So each state's a little bit different. And we talk about licensing, it's a little bit different for each state there too. Most states do seem to have a strong social equity program, meaning that certain individuals who meet a specific criteria as set by the legislature can collaborate with a donor or an investor. So they have to be under a certain salary. They have to be living in a disproportionate area as defined by the Social Equity Council. And so they are typically then majority partners for an operation, for a license. There, on the other side, is a lottery that anybody can apply to. Applications are all very different between states that I've seen, and what they require, information that they require. A lot of them, they want to know who you are as a business. They want to know how you're going to impact the community in a positive way. They want to know that you have all of your ducks in a row. They want to have all of your build out plans. They want to have all the information that they could possibly need to know that you are ready to, if you had a building, open your doors today. Obviously, nobody has a building at that point. But the build out is there. The plans are all laid out. So the government really works hand in hand with the licensee holder at that point. However, it costs a lot of money. And again, different in different states. I can't give solid numbers for the company that I work for just because of NDA, but I can tell you that it would either take a group of investors or someone who just has a decent amount of capital to really afford to just apply. I mean, we're looking at thousands of dollars just for an application fee, and you don't get that money back. You don't
Yeah.
get that money back. So it's non-refundable whether you get a license or not. A lot of governments, state governments, they don't even tell everybody that they didn't win. And so it is a little, in terms of the future of medical cannabis, in my personal opinion, and this is just me speaking as an individual and not the opinion of Tara Leaf per se, but it can lead to cornering the market and keeping people out of the market who really paved the way for us to be here. But luckily, that's why we have Tara Leaf specifically, we have the Vowed Project, which is our nonprofit, which is working. We're fundraising right now, and eventually our goal is to try to get some people out of jail who are in there for nonviolent cannabis crimes and get them transitioned back into society, because without these people, we wouldn't be here. So, you have billion-dollar companies who can really afford to submit, hundreds of license applications per state, because you don't just submit once, you submit multiple times.
So it's
like a
really
lottery.
ridiculous
Yeah.
process.
The mega millions, right?
Yeah.
Someone just won over $1 billion, but you don't win it by buying one ticket. You have to buy multiple.
Yeah.
It's the same with licenses in different states.
So when they're submitting those, they're just submitting a bunch of different types of plans to see what
no, typically it would all be the same.
Same plan.
Like the same application that's going through multiple times. Yeah.
Okay. So do they have to show too up front that they have the money to like build the things? I mean, is that part of the requirement?
So there will be in my experience, there's specific pay dates. So you have to basically give the money by this specific date, to the government. And if you don't meet that deadline, then, you can have your license revoked, and then all the money you've paid up to that point, you don't get back anyway. So free money for the government.
Yeah, exactly. So I know you said that it was based on several different factors and it varies per state. Do most states cap them then at the number, like you're only allowed so many, or does that vary?
So no.
Okay.
Again, this is just my experience with the few states that I've been involved in, but anybody can apply. Virtually anybody can apply. You can apply as many times as you want, and I don't believe that they cap it. And they publish the numbers too. You can see them, how many people have applied for each license. And then at a certain point, they close applications. They stop accepting them. And then what they'll do is review applications and send out, almost like applying for a job. If you're working in HR, you get all these resumes in, you review, maybe not even all of them. I would like to think that they review all of them, but I've never been sitting in the room with any of these people as they're going over these applications. But then they will reach out to a set number of applicants to offer, in a lot of times, what acts as like a preliminary license. So at that point, you still don't have a license, but now they want to confirmation on your build out plans. They want to they put you through to the next step of the application process, which is basically an even tighter review. But they will only, for instance, in West Virginia, 10 grower processors were afforded licenses to grow and process, right? Out of those, that is 10 out of thousands of applicants.
Wow. Okay.
Right. So you have to be real tight. You have to have a good story. You have to have good capital,
Sure.
because I'm not necessarily a conspiracy theory person here per se, but when you have MSOs that are billion-dollar corporations and they're opening in every state, you got to wonder, it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
I got you.
Why do they always win?
Yeah, yep, money and power, right? Greed, money, power makes the world go around that we live in, doesn't
Well,
it?
cannabis is green and money is green, but
That's all right. So you've gotten your license then. So do all the dispensaries like have their own grow license? Like are they all growing their own products or are those two separate things?
they are two separate things.
Okay.
Yes. We
Okay.
would call a dispensary, an operator who owns a dispensary and their own grow. We would say that it's a vertical operation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that the majority, the minority? Like do most like is it a 50-50 split? I mean, I'm not expecting that you know this for every state, but I'm just do most people have their own growers or do they use somebody different or
Um, well, it depends on, again, yeah, it depends on the state. It
mm-hmm.
depends on the company.
Sure.
Um, I would argue that if you operate and only sell your own stuff,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to limit your, uh, I guess, own availability in a
Yeah.
state.
Yeah.
Um, so wholesale is a big thing in cannabis. Everybody's selling to everybody. Um, but I would say, yeah, it's very common to have, especially with large multi-state operators.
Okay.
A lot of times, what they will do is come into a market and purchase a grow. Sometimes, excuse me, multiple grows, and
Mm-hmm.
then however many they're legally allowed to purchase, and then they'll start buying up dispensary chains.
Mm-hmm.
It happens all the time, and it's happening more and more. I mean, Columbia Care, one of the biggest cannabis companies in the country, just had a historic merger with Cresco Labs,
Mm-hmm.
which both giant multi-state operators. And Cresco Labs owns Sunnyside Dispensaries, but now Columbia Care owns Sunnyside Dispensaries.
Mm-hmm.
So you might even have a situation in some states or in some municipalities where there are there was a Sunnyside on that corner, there was a Cannabis on that corner, and now they're both owned by the same company.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So it's interesting to see as these companies grow and expand how these things are happening. But I would say that there are more benefits than there are more pros than cons to being vertically
Right.
integrated.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's talk like financing for a minute. So since we're not, federal with the marijuana yet, um, there's certain like federally backed banks and things, right? You can't get financing for those projects, or am I wrong in saying that? Like, how does that work?
I'm not entirely sure, like 100% exactly how it works, but I
Mhm.
can tell you that because there's no Safe Banking Act,
Mhm.
what it seems is that the cannabis industry is forced to operate almost solely on cash.
Okay.
I don't know a percentage off the top of my head, but it's probably somewhere in like the 70 percentile, maybe 60 because of CanPay and some other platforms out there that do allow people to use their debit card. But most of the industry is run on cash. And unfortunately, a lot of banks will, if you are affiliated with cannabis, they won't lend you money.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not something that we can necessarily prove, but it happens a lot
Yeah.
where a cannabis company will try to go for a loan and they'll get denied just because the bank is afraid of the federal government seizing the asset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there is a big push. I know Pennsylvania just passed a law moving closer to safe banking. West Virginia, there are partners that we can work with, who we do work with, who offer some safe banking options, but they are very few and far between, which limits the ability again for people to get into this industry.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So as far as we talked about financing, what about legal wise? Like, I mean, we have so many states left now that don't even allow state marijuana. How long do you think it's going to take before we're kind of at the federal level and this is no longer this is a mute and void issue? I mean, do you think that's coming at some point pretty soon or?
Yeah, I think probably within the next 10 years, I would say, maybe
Yeah.
even sooner than that. I think that as big box cannabis grows, big box cannabis being our large multi-state operators and players in the game, as they grow, they're going to become more financially viable as a profit engine for even bigger companies like your CVS's. But I would say that there will always be room for that mom and pop grow, that mom and pop store as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say within the next 10 years for sure. And it'll change the game in some ways. You might be able to buy cannabis on Amazon, who knows? Get
Yeah.
delivered to your house by drone.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you think it, when that does come, it'll make the dispensaries, will it go the way of like Blockbuster and things like that when there's like bigger distribution channels? What do you think? Or you think there's always going to be that?
I think that, yeah, in some ways, yes, there will be a large distribution. There will be those big box companies that might sell a product.
Mhm,
But in my experience, Jodelle, honestly, I think that it's hard to really have a high quality product.
mhm,
Um, and it's even harder. I mean, where I work, I've been working in medical cannabis my entire career. I've not worked in an adult use market at all.
mhm.
So I understand that it's a little different when we get into that space. But in terms of a medicine, it's definitely a more difficult argument to make for a very large operation with low quality medicine
Mhm.
versus a smaller operation with much higher quality medicine.
Absolutely.
So I think that for anybody who's listening who is in this industry or wants to, there, I think will come a time where just like the boom in craft brewing that we've seen,
Mhm,
and even distilleries, it's not even just, it's trickled its way through other forms of alcohol, right? I think that we'll see more of that as regulations loosen, which I
absolutely.
think is great for medicinal access for patients. I think that
Yeah.
availability is a large issue.
Mhm.
It could be one of the benefits of federal descheduling.
Absolutely. So anything that you want to like talk about or add that we didn't cover as far as dispensaries go, or questions that you think that you see commonly about dispensaries that we didn't talk about?
I would say, THC.
Mhm,
Um, I think that, and again, this is just personal, but I've seen this push towards um, striving for the highest THC percentage.
mhm,
Um, I toured a grow, and I can't say who it was, but we asked the question, um, what do you feel is high quality? How do you define high quality of your medicine? And the response we received was something to the effect of, well, it depends on what you look at as quality. Some
mhm,
people would think a high THC percentage means good quality. Other
mhm,
people think high terpene content is good quality. So there's this misinformation that is um, being distributed to people in both adult use and medical markets, that
mhm,
the highest THC percentage flower is going to be the most effective medicine, or the highest THC percentage vape cart or concentrate, the highest amount of milligrams I can get in a capsule or in a candy bar,
mhm,
or in a cookie. I want that. And, prices seem to also be set by some of these big box cannabis companies that are higher for those products.
mhm,
And it is a huge myth. And just to debunk it real quick, I think
Mhm.
that it's really important for anybody who's into cannabis to understand that um, you, when you have such high THC percentage product, um, you're getting a lot of THC, but you're missing out on some of the other potential therapeutic applications and benefits from our essential oils from the plant, from our flavonoids in the plant.
Mhm.
Um, these are, I always tell people, if THC is a road, you are the vehicle, right? We are our own vehicle. And when you have THC, you're driving really fast, a high amount of driving really fast, a low amount, you're driving a little slower, but you're going straight.
Mhm.
Terpenes are what take us on a more scenic route. They're
Mhm.
going to turn the road to the left, curve it to the left. So I got to slow down around that curve, or they're going to curve it to the right. And, the left being relaxing, sedating, the right being more uplifting,
Mhm.
stimulating. And there are different terpenes and different terpene combinations in the plant in conjunction with THC that truly provide the effect, the desired effect, and the desired symptom relief. So for anybody who is looking to shop, the next time you go in, ask your bud tender, for more information about terpenes. And if they don't have that information, come to Terra Leaf.
There you go. There you go. Well, yeah, you're right. There's hundreds of constituents in these like marijuana plants, right? Like we talk about THC so much, but there's so many other beneficial things in there. So that's a
Yeah.
great point to mention. Well, Joe, if somebody wants more information about Terra Leaf or to get a hold of you, how would they get in touch with you?
So for me specifically, my email address, Joseph L at mcstaffing.net. You could probably throw it in a description, I
Mhm.
think. Or if you go on to terraleafwv.com, that's a great place to for hopeful patients or people who are looking to become patients, as I stumble over my words, to get more information as well.
Great. Okay. Well, Joe, we really appreciate you being here and educating us today about the dispensaries. And as always, we will end with a quote. And this one is from Lester Grispoon, and it's cannabis is remarkably safe, although not harmless. It is surely less toxic than most of the conventional medicines it could replace if it were legally available. Despite its use by millions of people over thousands of years, cannabis has never caused an overdose death. So we'll leave you with that. And Joe, great talking to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jadelle. I had a great time.